Hello, and welcome back to this week's news segment on How to Fix Our Society 101. Today, I have Dr. Jennifer Page here with me, who would like to share what she believes is the secret to turning the society around.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the viewers. I have a lot to cover, so I'd like to jump right in if that's all right.
Yes, of course. We love a good go-getter spirit.
Well, these are people's lives we're talking about, and it's essential to act fast.
All right, so what is that you believe causes so many of our world's problems?
Well, Ellen, I believe it is trauma.
What exactly is trauma, and why do you think it's devastating our world?
An experience where an individual's life or their loved one's life and integrity is compromised or threatened is referred to as a traumatic event. Oftentimes, traumatic events will leave the witness and victims with symptoms and life-altering effects. These symptoms and behaviors that follow are often categorized as something called PTSD, also known as post-traumatic stress disorder. The effects of PTSD manifest differently in the lives of children versus those in adults, which is why it's important to differentiate and know the difference.
Sounds interesting. Tell us more about trauma.
Well, these traumatic events can be categorized into two different types of trauma. The first type is called acute trauma. Acute traumas typically are a one-time occurring event that is short-lived. However, the second type is called chronic traumatic situations. Now, this form of trauma takes place over a series of traumatic events and is typically over a long period of time. Examples of chronic traumatic stress situations are various forms of abuse, domestic violence, and wars.
How fascinating. But how often does this actually occur?
Well, there is a high likelihood that everyone will experience a trauma at some point in their lives. And now, I know you may be wondering, well, that means I've probably experienced trauma. And yes, Ellen, you probably have, as have probably most of our viewers. However, you also may be thinking, I've done quite well for myself. I own this whole TV segment. But not everyone is as blessed and as fortunate to be able to recover from trauma in the same way. And there are certain psychosocial factors and certain risk factors that predispose certain individuals to more traumas and inhibit their healings post those traumas. Specifically, individuals that have strong, loving support systems, like you probably did, within their families and their communities are less likely to suffer from extreme long-term consequences. Yet those that don't, that have the familial support or the community and the resources, they are more likely to suffer from negative impacts throughout the rest of their lives. Many of these families that fall into this category are lower socioeconomic families. And sadly, because they don't have the access they need to help, they're unable to help their children overcome these problems as well.
Interesting. What happens when people do not receive the help they need?
Well, when an individual doesn't receive the help and the care they need following a traumatic event, their emotional and intellectual development is oftentimes severely stunted. The neurodevelopment and growth of the brain are two very significant areas that are impacted. And as a result of the damage, individuals often struggle with social conduct, morals, personality formation, emotional regulation. And all of these setbacks not only affect just the victim that's experiencing them and not just their family and their communities, but all of us around them as well. You see, each of the developmental delays caused by trauma are linked to severe world problems that are costing taxpayers tons of money. Which, I mean, I believe I'm paying quite a few taxes, and you probably are, Ellen, and so are probably all of the viewers. So each of you are affected is what I'm telling you.
What type of world problems are we talking about?
Well, to just mention a few of the world problems that trauma contributes to: mental illness, poverty, low academic achievements, addiction, and crime. You see, as these traumatic negative outcomes happen when they can't emotionally regulate, they are no longer able to take place as a contributing member of society. Oftentimes, the brain composition changes leads to lack of motivation, lack of social skills, and as a result, they oftentimes have lower academic achievements, as mentioned earlier, or dropout rates, which also leads to teen pregnancy, addiction, crime, and also homelessness, and bringing children in just repeats that cycle.
Okay. Is there any hope?
There is most definitely hope. Praise the Lord, Ellen, there is hope. For individuals who experience developmental delays and setbacks due to trauma, there is hope for them. But action must be taken as soon as possible to prevent more delays and more individuals from experiencing these negative impacts. Previously, communities have instituted trauma-informed care policies. Now, these policies incorporate a multi-pronged approach that must be carried out on multiple levels to ensure that it will work effectively. The 4 prongs of these approaches are known as effective interventions, strong partnerships, tools and training, and trauma-informed policy.
So, why hasn't anybody begun using these techniques?
Well, thankfully they have, and there actually are systems and programs already in place, but not enough. These intervention plans that are currently in place span from prevention all the way to healing and recovery programs, because not everything can be prevented, which means we have to work on the secondary side. Overcoming early experience of domestic violence, child-parent psychotherapy for family violence, helping children cope and recover, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, coaching caregivers, parent-child interaction therapy, and working in the schools, cognitive behavioral intervention for trauma in schools, are all just a couple of examples of programs that are making huge differences that are close and dear to my heart. The prevention of trauma is particularly important because it teaches children and adults resiliency, which they can then foster into their communities. And as resiliency is built up, then they are able to combat what might be inevitable traumas in the future.
So, what is the whole strong partnerships thing about?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. This is very important. So this is the first step. This is the second step. The first step was effective interventions that are already in place. So the second step is essential to creating strong partnerships because programs in these systems, in order to be effective, it is necessary that they have strong networks that support and encourage them. The partnership is necessary from all levels of power need to be supporting. So all the way from local level politicians to federal level. These partnerships can also be assisted by multiple disciplinary teams. It is crucial to involve these people because their efforts and expectations for the programs will not be met without them. So a couple of these different types of people may be counselors, guardians, law enforcement. But that also bleeds a bit into the tools and training, which I'll cover a bit in a second. However, when all of these support systems come together, they create a strong partnership that will help individuals assure that intervention programs will meet their needs.
So what's the third step?
So that third step is what I was just talking about, tools and training. Tools are necessary because they determine service models and how they will be facilitated. And the training portion is equally as important because that equips and teaches these leaders that are going to be meeting these people's needs how to meet these people's needs and how to empathize with them so that they can be most effective. So this is where the different professional help that I was talking about a moment ago comes in. For example, mental health counselors, guardians, law enforcement, foster care guardians, social workers, and educators are just a couple examples of professionals that are so necessary to this network.
That makes so much sense.
Well, the fourth and final step is referred to as the action area. During this step, it is important to gain the support and especially the financial support necessary to equip these programs. For especially policymakers from the local to federal levels, this is when we need to get them involved. They play a very essential, critical part to supporting the cause, mostly because, well, first, they lead the funding of these events, which, keeps them in business and keeps them meeting the people's needs. Additionally, policymakers, as you know, and as all of you know, they're in a position of power and influence, so they can help you to be able to gain more encouragement and support from those around you as they campaign for themselves as well.
So what you're telling me is these prevention programs require the help of many types of people. Even politicians?
Especially politicians. The 4 steps help to ensure that programs can be put into action as effectively as possible. And as I previously mentioned, there are many programs and trauma prevention systems that have already been put into place. A couple of additional programs and laws that are fighting the effects of trauma and abuse are the Terrorism and Disaster Program. Absolutely love them, doing great things. The Training Program, Data and Evaluation Program, and finally the Service Systems Program. Each of these programs aid in the fight against negative effects of trauma. However, there are so many communities that still need our help and are not being reached. So therefore, it is important that politicians, counselors, teachers, educators, TV presenters, that we all get involved and take action.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very compelling and interesting. Well, folks, you heard a solution here first. Tune in next week and you hear about the next solution for solving our world's problems.
Thank you.